Today we're out in the garden and joined by Riley Coy with the Oklahoma Forestry Services. And Riley, help us to decide how to select the right tree for our landscape. Could you please?
Absolutely. So you've decided that you want a tree, right?
Right.
It's not exactly like saying, I want this pretty flower, let's go stick it in the yard and see how it does. A tree is a commitment. It's a lifelong commitment. Trees have a much longer time scale than humans do. So you've got to consider your objectives before you even get anywhere to select a tree.
And in some cases, they can be a little pricier up front to buy too. So you want to make sure you're investing well.
Right. These are your resources, your hard-earned resources.
Right.
So, put a little bit of forethought into it before you go and select a tree.
Okay, so what are some of the things that we need to consider? It's not just I like that one, right?
Well, you need to consider, first and foremost, probably the size at maturity.
Okay.
If you're wanting something to shade your home, you're wanting something tall and big, maybe you've got utility lines overhead in your backyard, so you don't want the utility company having to come through and prune them in the future. Maybe you want something different than size. Maybe you're looking for fruit production. Maybe you're looking for fall foliage. Maybe you're looking for spring flowers.
Okay.
All of those are considerations that go into the first steps of choosing the proper tree for your location.
Okay, and I know sometimes it's about how fast it will grow also, or even sometimes the debris. Some of the stuff's falling on us right now out here under these soapberries.
Yeah, we're standing under a stand of soapberries right here, and they're in full bloom this time of year. And right now they're shedding their little flowers, so that's what you see kind of raining down on us. But no, unfortunately, a lot of people really want a fast-growing shade tree, and then they don't want it to drop anything. That's something you have to know, is that the faster a tree grows, the more brittle it is, the more it'll break and shed limbs under high winds and ice and things that we get in Oklahoma pretty often.
So what are some of those fast-growing trees, but be mindful that they might break on us too?
There's American sycamore. There's all the maples are pretty fast-growing trees.
Okay.
There are several different ones. River birch, we've got some on the grounds here. River birch is a really quickly, rapid-growing tree that is also fairly messy. Most of those trees can tend to be messier trees.
Okay.
The slower growing trees are going to be less messy, but it's also a longer time commitment before you realize that shade.
Okay, all right. So obviously you mentioned maturity and size, that's critical, whether you want it to be big or you want it to stay small under those power lines. Can you give us a couple of, good trees that might work under power lines, or maybe some taller shade trees also?
Yeah, absolutely. When you're looking at utility plantings, things like Eastern redbud, American smoke tree would be a good option. Things that stay under about 20 feet tall at full maturity. There are different viburnums out there. The snowball viburnum is one good option. Our native version of the viburnum is called the rusty blackhaw. A little hard to find in the nursery industry, but a great option if you can find it.
Okay.
There are a lot of different species that stay under that mark for utility line plantings that are good options.
Okay. What if, a lot of times I know we'll drive through the neighborhood, we'll see something in our neighbor's yard and think, oh, that's a cool tree, I hope to get that in my yard. I mean, is that a good way to, by looking at our neighbors and seeing what they have, is that a good assessment? Or
that's an amazing assessment.
Okay.
Yes. Drive around, look at what's planted and what's growing well. You're going to see some that aren't growing well. You're going to see some that are doing fantastic. Try to figure out what those are. If there's not a whole lot of them, maybe that's what you want in your yard.
Okay.
If there are a whole lot of them, for instance, Shumard oak. Shumard oak is a great tree for Oklahoma, but it's heavily planted. So maybe you like the look of a Shumard oak, but you want something different that's going to grow as well as a Shumard oak. So in the forestry industry, we talk about associated species a lot. So Shumard oaks naturally grow down by creeks, so they like a wetter type soil. Other trees that fit that same criteria are pecan, black walnut, all the sycamores, things like that. Bur oak is a great example of a white oak that's going to get really big at maturity, and it's going to fit the same criteria as the Shumard oak.
Okay.
So looking at those associated species can really help you narrow down the species that's right for your yard.
Okay, and you mentioned a couple of nut varieties there too, which kind of can lead you into potentially if you wanted something that could produce for you, right? And whether that's for you or even for the wildlife potentially.
Absolutely. Yeah, there are a lot of options. There are a lot of native options even for food producing trees. The American persimmon is a great option. Can be messy, if you're not out there harvesting the fruit falls to the ground. Can get a little stinky and attract some flies, but there are several of those options. The Mexican plum is a small statured tree that produces a great fruit. The pawpaw, North America's largest native fruit.
Yeah.
It kind of tastes like a mango and a banana. Awesome fruit. Small statured tree, goes great under power lines. Kind of needs a wet spot, a little dappled shade. If you've got that in your yard, grab you a couple of those. You're going to need 2 of them so that they can pollinate each other
Right.
in order to realize the fruit, but that's a great option as well.
Okay, and that kind of leads me to another thing. I think a lot of times we think trees full sun, but the pawpaw is a prime example of something that might need a little more of that understory or the edge of the canopy there, right? And so sometimes you have to take in your environmental conditions, whether that's soil or sun exposure as well.
Absolutely. The pH of your soil is a
Right.
big factor of it. If you want to grow a flowering dogwood in Tulsa, doesn't mean it's going to grow in Oklahoma City, even though we're in the same grow zone.
Okay, and is that applicable also north to south in Oklahoma as well?
A little bit, not quite as much. You know, southern magnolias not going to like our extreme winters in the northern fringes of the state, but they do great down south around Durant.
Yeah.
Other things like the escarpment live oak does great in the south. The further north you go, it has a little harder time because it does get colder up north. So you have to consider all that. North and south has some bearing to it, but east and west has a much larger bearing on whether a tree is going to work or not.
Okay, all right. So it's a little bit more complicated than just going and picking your favorite tree at the nursery. At least go in kind of with your thoughts in mind about where this tree is going to go and maybe what are some of those prime qualities that you want to ensure that you have as an investment.
Absolutely. A little bit of research on the front end of selecting your tree is going to pay dividends on the back end.
Okay.
And if you want to go deeper into it and learn more about it, you can always call your local forester with Oklahoma Forestry Services. You can call your local arborist, and you can call the OSU Extension office for your county. All of those people are going to have great suggestions.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
We hope you enjoyed this video as part of our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. You can also find even more videos on the OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.